langzamer dan langzame reis van Kampen naar Moskou. We zijn nu in Noord-Italië, maar de aflevering gaat over Lazarete Nuovo, het voormalig quarantaine-eiland in de lagune van Venetië. Hier werd vanaf de 15e eeuw alles en iedereen naartoe gebracht waarvan men maar dacht dat hij besmet zou kunnen zijn met de pest.
L'utilizzo era differente, cioè il lazzaretto vecchio era l'ospedale.
The old Lazzaretto was created in 1423 and more or less 40 years later this one was created too. The first one, I mean the old Lazzaretto, was actually used as a hospital where people were treated. This was more an area for prevention. So the people who were suspected to be contagious were kept here for 40 days. And this is why Gerolamo is saying that the word quarantena in Italian, quarantine in English, was born here because 40 is the Italian for 40. Why 40 days? It was a biblical number. 40 days in the desert, like Jesus Christ. So 40 was a big quantity, long enough for a person to show the symptoms or not.
C'erano molti edifici, era tutta pavimentata, si intravedono qua e là dei pavimenti che affiorano.
The island was full of buildings. Each of them was called Teson. That is a Venetian dialect word that means roof, shelter. Actually, the buildings were open, just a roof on top of them. Air was really important, so they wanted to keep the air to circulate. The Bora, that is the northern wind, the wind that blows from the boreal hemisphere, was able to enter and makes the goods and the merchandise, let's say, healthier. The goods we are talking about were mainly fabrics, carpets, silk, cotton, hemp, and so on. They provided a very good shelter to the black rats that came from Africa or from the Middle East. Actually, the rats were not the guilty ones, but on the contrary, the parasites, the fleas that were able to live on them. And the name of the bacteria that caused the plague was Yersinia pestis, that was transmitted to the people by the bites of those fleas.
Sono testimonianze dell'uso sanitario, delle attività sanitarie che si svolgevano qui dentro.
What you see drawn on the wall is the witness of the activity that took place here. So actually those inscriptions were made by the caretakers of the island and of this Teson itself. Actually, those patterns are logos, and each one belonged to a particular trader, and so they were used to locate the merchandise and the goods belonging to this person in a particular area of the Teson. And so they could recognize who the owner was very easily according to those logos, inscriptions. Sometimes the ship was directly drawn, designed on the wall, so that they could know that the merchandise belonging to that ship was stored in this particular area of the Teson. That ship is very well drawn with a lot of details. We can see the sails, we can see the house deck located by the bow and by the aft of the ship, and you can also see the mooring rope, and at the end of it you can see the anchor.
Yeah.
And we also the inscriptions also tells us that that ship came from Costantinopoli. You can read that.
Le case per ospitare i marinai, i mercanti, i viaggiatori delle navi.
That is the plan of the island at the end of the 1500, and so you can see that the homes of the people who were confined here were located along the perimeter of the island. They were more or less 100 different homes. Each one had its own chimney, so more than 100 chimneys, and this is why the island was also called the castle. Because those many chimneys made the island look like a castle. On the ground floor, the kitchens were located. On the upper floor, the bedrooms. And you can clearly see the two armories with the pyramid-shaped roof. So you see on the left-hand side, you see the ship approaching the island, and the men that are using some baskets and hanging from some very long sticks is able to provide some food to the people who lived inside these small homes. And you can see the floor of two different rooms.
It was 2 levels. the
Yeah,
floor.
all of them had 2 stories, and the kitchen was located on the ground floor. The bedroom was always located on the upper floor.
So the men had to cook themselves.
If they had no wife, but
Oh.
otherwise, because an entire family could
Okay.
live inside a home, from 1 to 4 people belonging to the same
Family.
household. Yes.
So it was not only merchants and people coming in with ships staying here, but also people from the city were brought
Absolutely,
here.
it could be anything.
Yeah, that were
As soon
suspected.
as you had the suspicion that you might be infected, you had to come here. You know that during the times of the plague, the doctors had special clothes that they used to protect themselves against the disease. So a very long black gown, very thick and long boots and long gloves, a hat and a mask. The mask was really peculiar, with a very, very long and large nose that was hollow and that was filled with some aromatic herbs such as thyme, rosemary, sage, and sponges, natural sponges that were dipped into some vinegar or perfumes to keep the germs and the bad smells away.
What time was this in usage, this costume?
Dunque sappiamo che è stato usato in Francia all'inizio.
So this kind of costume was used in France first, more or less during the first half of the 1600s, and it was used in Venice until the end of the plague. When the plague disappeared, of course, also the costume was abandoned, and then it came back again for Carnival, but with a totally different function.
Yeah.
Queste medagliette qui erano cucite, i pendaggi venivano cuciti, quindi erano tutti vestiti. Uno addirittura aveva un sacchettino.
Most of the people were buried with their own clothes, and many charms could be found sewn onto the clothes. A body, a corpse, was found, and it still had a bag full of gold coins. So nobody dared stealing from them.
Because it was the plague and you don't want to get sick.
Yeah, it was too dangerous.
Yeah.
Poi parliamo del priore. Intanto guardatevi il panorama.
So he's inviting us to go up and
panorama
admire
che si
the lagoon
vedeva il
and
priore.
to enjoy the panorama.
Specie
That even
d'inverno
the governor.
con le giornate
enjoy.
limpide.
Ah, fantastic. Guarda Gabby. You see Burano again with the Leaning Bell Tower on the right hand side. St. Francis of the Desert Island, that is the seat of a Franciscan monastery on our right hand side. And the Barinas, these sandbars.
And this is
Murano.
Oh, that's Murano.
That is
yeah.
Murano.
Yeah.
Queste sono le barene, cioè il territorio umido, vivono piante particolari, insomma, che non ha né terra né acqua, una via di mezzo, una zona
So this
umida.
area is what we call Barena, a very humid land that is not dry land, that is not water, something exactly in between. You see that the area is divided into many smaller ones by these very, very narrow canals that we call gebi. And this kind of land is very, very important for the birds, for the fish, and also for the depuration of the water itself. Now the extension of the Barenas is actually dramatically smaller than it used to be in the past.
Okay.
We figure that just the 10% of Barenas are left if compared to the times of the Republic of Venice.
Yeah. So actually these Barenas, they filter the water.
They filter the
clean
water.
the water.
They clean the water.
So
yeah.
they're actually very important
They
to
are,
have.
they are.
Yeah.
The filtration of the water is due to the plants,
Yeah.
not the mud, the
No,
plants that
yeah.
are very peculiar. They are called alophile because they can tolerate salt, because you have to think that all this area can be covered by the water during a normal or even more during an exceptional high tide. In the past, during the times of the Republic of Venice, until the 1700, the water of the lagoon was brackish water
Okay.
because we had the contribution of the sea that entered the lagoon twice per day, as it does nowadays, but also the contribution of the fresh water coming from the rivers that ended into the lagoon. Of course, the rivers transported a lot of silt, and they were transforming the lagoon into a piece of land.
Okay.
The rivers were filling the lagoon with too much land, and this is why the Venetians decided to divert all the rivers that ended into the lagoon during the 1700s.
Oh.
From that time on, so almost 3 centuries, we have no fresh water.
Yeah.
So this is one of the many water cisterns of the island. We shouldn't call them wells because there is no natural water spring underneath. They are cisterns made of bricks. We estimate that there were more or less 7-8 water cisterns like this one on the
So
island.
The water it's rainwater that is coming in and that's being saved. Is it that it's only water, let's say, coming in through this little hole, or was there a system to guide the rainwater into the cistern?
So you have to imagine that the home of the governor of the island was actually here. So there were 2 systems to convey the rainwater into the cistern. Some holes, like in Venice, around the cistern itself, but then there were also the pipes along the roof of the buildings were used. So
Yeah.
the tiles and the pipelines led the water into the cistern.
Per impedire l'ingresso dell'acqua salata.
The cistern was more or less 5 meters deep, and it was isolated from the rest of the soil by clay, and then it was filled with sand. The sand was able to keep the rainwater in the dark and in the best hygienic conditions, so no oxygen, so no germs. Of course, the water that comes from the sky enters the area filled with sand, and slowly it is able to penetrate the central pipe. This is why the water of the cisterns were never used to extinguish a fire.
That's the famous well.
And this is the well with the San Mark.
C'è un bellissimo leone di San Marco qui, che merita di essere fotografato.
So the
Questo
lion
è
is
il
really
più bel leone che
beautiful.
si conservi su una vela da pozzo.
Probably this is the best preserved lion that we can find on a stone
Oh, really?
in Venice.
Okay. And how old is this?
Questo ha 500 anni.
500 years old.
almeno.
1500
At
something.
least,
Fine
yes.
400,
So probably it was done at the very end of the 1400. There are not so many original lions left in
Okay.
Venice, so this
Yeah.
is one of the
La
few
maggior
ones.
parte sono stati scalpellati durante la dominazione
And why is that?
straniera.
Because the most of them have been were hammered by Napoleon,
Oh, of
who
course.
wanted who wanted to destroy the symbol of the power of the city.
And there you have this island abandoned, so it's kept
Yes.
as it is.
Perché i libri erano sempre chiusi.
So you can tell
Fino
the
alla fine
age
del
of a lion looking at that book. Until the end of the 1500, the books are always closed. Only after that time they started being made open with the inscription in Latin.
I read a story that above the arsenal you have also a lion with a closed book.
The legend says that every time the Republic of Venice made a new lion, but the Republic was in war, the book was closed because actually when it is open there is
The piece.
peace.
But originally it was
Closed.
Het is tijd om onze serie over Venetië af te sluiten en terug te keren naar onze oorspronkelijke route, namelijk die van Kampen naar Moskou. Ben je benieuwd naar het vervolg van onze reis? Klik dan hieronder op subscribe. En heb je genoten van deze aflevering? Geef ons dan een like of een thumbs up, want dan weten wij ook dat je genoten hebt.